Did it jump on? Oh, give it a second. It's still loading. Should be there. You there? Is it live?
Refresh.
We're just trying to see if we're live here, folks. Yep, it is. All right. So good morning, folks. Let's see who we've got out here. Morning, folks.
Oh,
Nope, turn
there's a
those
delay
off.
there.
Yeah, there's always a delay. Who's in the chat? Oh, Kusim is there. Good morning, Kusim. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start recording. Good morning. Good Tuesday morning. We are here with our Tuesday training and tactics. We're going to tackle unrepresented buyers. I have had so many conversations about this with agents. So let me get started and share my screen. I'm going to move this aside just so I can try to be able to do that. There we go. Let me share my screen so you can follow along. See if this works. All right, let's double check that that is what is online. There's just a slight delay, making sure that that is there. Good morning, come on in. Awesome, that is there. We are going to talk about unrepresented buyers. How many people are concerned about working with unrepresented buyers?
This guy.
This guy, oh, I got a couple of guys here, a couple of gals too. All right. We are going to go over this a couple of different ways, and this is going to be interactive. I've got people here, folks online. You can probably unmute if you'd like to, but keep your video off just because we're recording. But if you want to chime in, feel free. Let's get started. Unrepresented buyers. So here's the question. Can you, as an agent, use the AAR purchase contract to write an offer for an unrepresented buyer?
Yes.
So yes, yes. Anybody else knows? Any knows? Yes, you believe you can? Okay.
Is there a box?
We'll look for that.
Okay.
So the answer is yes, but why? Why is the answer yes? Because you're writing it. No, I think I said something more than that.
Oh, you did?
I think I did say something more than that.
Oh.
Why are we allowed to write a contract for an unrepresented buyer? Here with Realty One Group in Arizona. Gave you a tip.
Because we're part of the association and we're realtors?
Nope.
Okay.
Because our designated broker has said we can.
Wow.
So you will hear from agents that will say you can't do that. Well, they may not be able to do that because their brokerage may say, nope, don't want you doing it. If somebody wants to write that, tell them to write a sheet of paper, put down what they want and hand it in, and then you can counter the terms and conditions of the purchase contract, okay? Or your seller needs to write the offer to the buyer for the seller's terms and let the buyer respond to that offer. Do it backwards, okay? So again, you are granted this right currently under our designated broker. Wow. This is not something, yes, it's allowed under state law, but whether a brokerage allows you to do it is up to that brokerage. So please understand that so that because I know you're going to hear other people saying, you can't do that. Maybe they can. All right. So let's flip this up just a second and talk about a buyer broker and buyer agency representation. So we need to see what we are not doing. So who remembers what you're responsible for doing in buyer agency representation? Does anything make sense? Look up here.
Oh, yeah.
What else? Come on, give me some of these. What are the things you're supposed to do in agency? I am. Buyer agency.
Yeah, protect better interests.
Loyalty. Okay. accounting or accountability, reasonable care, loyalty, obedience, advocacy. This is based off of the one that's carload, right? If you ever remember the carload version, disclosure, do old car too, doesn't matter, carload, both work. Okay, so those are what you're supposed to do when you do represent the buyer. Remember, you are not representing the buyer. So let's kind of look at if you were in a limited representation, right? So whether that is dual or whether there's another agent with Realty One Group, that's a limited representation. So what are the limitations of the duties owed to the buyer and the seller in a limited representation? Does anybody remember? Honesty. Do you know that there's actually, it's like literally written out?
Yes.
It's literally written out on the limited representation form. It says the broker will not, without written authorization, disclose to the other party that the seller will accept a price or terms other than stated in the listing, or that the buyer will accept a price or terms other than offered. So if you're representing the seller and I say, well, do you think the seller will take? What is your response?
I guess it depends on what they gave me written instructions for. If they said nothing, then I
If
would say,
you
"I
are a
can't tell you."
limited represented, what can you say?
I cannot tell you.
What can you say? What does that say? List price is $500,000. What can you say?
The list price is
They'll accept
$500,000.
$500,000.
List price is $500,000.
Right.
That's what you can say.
That's all
Okay.
you can
Oh.
say.
Okay.
You don't have any other written instructions under a limited representation that you can do anything
Okay.
other than saying that the seller will accept price or terms stated on the listing, on the MLS, okay? So what happens if you represent the buyer or you are, you represent the buyer, well, you're in a limited representation, and the seller asks you, well, don't you think the buyer can take less than this or will pay more than this? I want the buyer to pay, they offered $450, I want $485. Don't you think the buyer can pay $485? What can you say?
I don't know.
I don't know. Okay, I can ask.
Well, let's see here. Now, written authorization. So,
Or buyer will accept a price or terms other than offered. The only answer you can say is this was their offer. If you would like to counter it, we can send a counter back. You have no opinion on the matter. And this is under limited representation, folks. So please think about this. Now there's another paragraph. There will be conflicts of duty of loyalty, obedience, disclosure, and confidentiality. Disclosure of confidential information may be made only with written authorization, right? So if you happen to know that the seller can take $425, are you allowed to tell anybody that?
no.
No, right? Not unless they tell you that you in writing can say something more than that. So again, I'm trying to give you an idea as we step from being how passionate you are about representing your buyers, right? And then stepping into the limited representation scenario where your hands are kind of tied. Now we need to step to an unrepresented buyer. And I think the hardest thing to do in this scenario is step back from what you are used to doing so diligently, right? Protecting every last interest of that buyer. You cannot do that if they are unrepresented. Okay? So, unrepresented buyers. Licensees dealing with unrepresented parties should understand their limitations. Remind unrepresented parties of these limitations and avoid any conduct that might lead to implied agency, such as providing advice or allowing an unrepresented person to share confidential information with them without warning that this information will be passed on to their client, your client, right? Does that make sense? So you're talking to an unrepresented buyer and they start telling you that they have an extra $50,000 that they could use to buy this house, but they only want to offer 400,
Tell me that.
right? So you need to stop them and make sure they understand that confidentiality. So what do you think is, well, let me go to the next page here. So what form do we use? Any guesses?
Agency, no, well, no.
It's not limited representation, it's unrepresented buyer.
Unrepresented buyer plus.
Unrepresented buyer agreement, do you think that's the form we use?
Unrepresented buyer?
Uh-huh,
Yes.
oh, really? Okay.
Is there such a thing?
Let's see, how about a buyer broker agreement saying that we represent the seller?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. How about the real estate agency disclosure and election form?
Yeah, because it says you represent the seller.
Okay. How about unrepresented buyer compensation consent form?
Or- I hope I don't.
Anybody online having fun with this yet? No, I don't have anybody offering up to chat. We just got somebody else that came in. I'm gonna let them take a quick look at the screen. I'm gonna have them take a quick look at the screen and see that I'm asking what form do we use? Unrepresented buyer agreement form, buyer broker agreement saying we represent the seller, real estate agency disclosure and election, or the unrepresented buyer compensation consent form.
Well, what's the question? What's?
What form do we use for an unrepresented buyer?
Is there such thing as underrepresented buyer compensation consent?
No, I
That's
didn't
what I
say
thought.
these were real forms. I just asked you which form to use.
Okay.
It is absolutely a trick
Oh,
question.
I would
I
say
think it's
the
a real estate-
unrepresented buyer compensation consent.
Well-
Because they're an underrepresented buyer and you're wanting to represent them
Okay.
and you're wanting to get some kind of a compensation for that one.
Do you get compensation from an unrepresented buyer? Who pays compensation?
Right, well, no, right now the seller.
Well, who pays compensation?
Both.
The listing brokerage, right? The seller,
Yep,
right? So do you get compensation from a buyer that is unrepresented?
no,
No, that document does not exist, by the way.
Oh,
So,
So which one would it be?
agency.
oh, we'll get to that in just a second. So there is an unrepresented seller compensation consent form. So if you are ever dealing with an unrepresented seller, yes, there is a form for that. Because you're representing the buyer, you are trying to get compensation. You need to get that from the seller.
Like for sale by owner.
That is a for sale by owner. This is how you get compensation. When do you deliver this to an unrepresented seller? When does this form get signed?
With a purchase offer?
Before you provide a purchase offer. You have to get the compensation consent before you hand that offer over, okay? All right, and this is the bottom of that, because guess what? It talks about that you are representing the buyer, right? You are not representing the seller. So again, this is an unrepresented seller form. There is not an unrepresented compensation form. So what form do we use? Any guesses from those four that we spoke about earlier?
Unrepresented seller.
I was thinking,
This
For
is
unrepresented buyer.
unrepresented buyer.
agency for it, maybe. That'd be the only one.
Dun, dun, dun. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Oh, sorry.
Real estate, oh, you're good. You're live. We can hear you. Real estate agency disclosure and election. So that other form does not exist, by the way, that top form. So, all right. So let's talk about a real estate agency disclosure and election. Does this look right? Firm name unrepresented. Is the firm name unrepresented? Should that be how that looks? No? No? Okay. So it should look like this.
Let's say broker.
Yes. Firm name, broker, Realty One Group, acting through, and then I have my name there, right? That looks right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's look at the bottom of this form. So if you have not looked at the top of page 2 on the new agency form, there is a new paragraph in here that needs initials. I will tell you that probably 80% of the agency forms coming through do not have these initials. Please, 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 because it's brand new.
Yeah.
People don't realize there's something on the right side that needs an initial. So please make sure either buyer or seller, whoever is signing this form, needs to initial that, right? So compensation paid by a buyer or seller to the broker is always negotiable, blah, 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 blah. That's the whole thing that they're trying to make sure that the buyer or seller understands that it's negotiable, okay? So in an unrepresented buyer scenario, what boxes between 46 to 60 are the ones that should be checked?
49 represents the seller.
49,
49.
50,
Anything else get checked?
50.
Why would 50 get shown, checked?
Show buyer list. Oh, well, you're right. Never mind.
There's no limited representation.
No limited representation. It is unrepresented buyer. Okay, so line
56.
49.
Sorry, go ahead. I shouldn't be interrupting.
49. And so you were bringing up 56, but who is this document with, the buyer or the seller? It's with the buyer. It's with an unrepresented buyer. So can you check any of the boxes in seller or landlord election?
No.
No. Okay. So unfortunately, I didn't see that the green got left on there, but so on line 60, the box that says buyer should be checked on the bottom of that.
Should be.
So I didn't mean to have the green there. So that's what it should look like. And that is all it should look like for an unrepresented buyer. And this is the first form you should be doing with that buyer. I don't think I have the middle of it. See, I don't think I have the middle of the page. But basically it's going to talk about that representation and talk about what a buyer broker does, what limited representation. You are going to be showing them that you are doing the seller section, right? Remember how you have to explain that they are unrepresented and they are not getting what it says under the buyer representation. You want to focus that you represent the seller. And this is where you say, please do not tell me confidential information, right? This is the first document you have them sign where you state, do not tell me anything confidentially, because I'm obligated under the fiduciary with the seller to disclose that information. If you tell me you can pay $495 and you offer $450, I have to tell the seller you can pay $495. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's a big stop here. And the reason for that is because our software, when we go into either SkySlope Forms or Transaction Desk, has a tie-through. When you work on the agency form, what other form does that edit? Anybody know? Okay, I'll get to that. So here's the thing. You've created the agency form. You've typed this up before you're meeting with this person. What do you need to do?
I mean, so they get it signed.
You need to print it to a PDF, lock it down,
Oh, yeah, right.
okay? Because if you don't lock it down and you go into the purchase contract, it will change everything that you've just done. All right, so let me see if this is going to make sense.
In both SkySlope and,
SkySlope Forms and Transaction Desk, they
It'll do
both
it,
tie
right?
together. If you have them pulled into the same thing, they will tie. they will crisscross. So remember when I showed you that, well, if this is what we've entered on the agency, if we've put my information on the agency, this is what autofills on 8Q, which is page 10 of the purchase contract. Is that what you want to have on the purchase contract for an unrepresented buyer?
No, because you're not representing them.
Correct. You cannot have that information, but when you filled out agency, it's going to move all this stuff over.
Are you able to just delete it manually at all, or no? Or is that gonna be just a headache?
If you have not saved your agency form and you delete this, your agency form will look like that very first one I showed you that said unrepresented. I'll show you in a minute, right? So do not allow this information to be back on the back of your purchase contract, okay? This is what will fill if you did that ready form and you filled in with your information, it will autofill here, right? So what it needs to say is, well, how does that look? Does that look correct?
Well, if you're, yeah, if the buyer's unrepresented, that's information that it should be.
So the only thing in lines 443 to 448 should be unrepresented. So you have to remove all the broker information and type the word unrepresented. Remember that very first agency form I showed you showed the broker name is unrepresented? That's because I typed this up. And then guess what? There it was on that other form. So start with agency, fill that in, lock it to a PDF. Does everybody understand what I mean? Lock it to a PDF.
Yep.
When you print to a PDF, it locks it down. You're going to save that file to the side.
Right.
And you can print it out if you're going to go meet with that person. And by the way, 9,000%, you should be meeting this person in person. You should not be sending via DocuSign or e-sign the purchase contract or any of this stuff.
Less.
They're out of state. Right. And then I would be doing it over Zoom.
Don't they have coffee?
Well, Zoom,
Because
you
of
do
the
Zoom. You do it through Zoom. I would be doing it through Zoom. Okay, question on line 50. Should the seller box be checked or buyer box? What should be checked down on line 50?
So
So
Seller.
somebody read for me line 449.
Agency confirmation broker named in section 8Q above is the agent of check one. Well, because there is no broker name in 8Q if they're unrepresented.
Correct. So should any of those boxes be checked?
No.
No, not at all. That's why I'm doing this class today. No, okay? It should say unrepresented and nothing is checked because there is no broker in section 8Q and you are not confirming your agency because you are not a part of 8Q, okay? All right, so let's talk about unrepresented buyer forms. Agency, the ready form, right? We just talked about it. That is the unrepresented buyer form you will use. You will talk about your representation of the seller and your confidentiality, your fiduciary is to the seller. I know this is so backwards from everything you want to do for that buyer. Oops, I hit two of those. So other documents you're going to do, affiliated business arrangement, our ABA form. Why are you using that form with this unrepresented buyer?
So they should probably still be made aware that you may be working with a vendor that's connected with ROG.
Disclosure, 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 right? You're disclosing those relationships. The buyer advisory, right? You cannot assist them. What do you become? The source of the source. Here is the buyer advisory. You have questions? Go look for it. Here you go, right? and you want to make sure they're delivered that. Wire fraud.
Wire fraud, market conditions, all that stuff, same stuff.
I miss market conditions, but yes, market conditions. Pre-qualification form, right? Their lender needs to prepare that and the buyer needs to sign it. Okay? We get too many of these that the buyers are not signing these. That buyer needs to know what is on there. You are not the one communicating with that lender. They are preparing that for that buyer. That buyer needs to sign it, or proof of funds. Now, I did speak to Ron this morning. He actually would like all of these signed. Okay. There are some companies that are going to say they're not signing, they aren't going to have their buyers sign that. Again, I spoke to Ron. He's our designated broker. He would prefer that this unrepresented buyer does sign these. If the unrepresented buyer refuses, then you need to create proof of delivery that you gave them to them. Okay. And that's fine. We will take that. But he would prefer if they would sign them. So part of the reason, I'm going to start at the very top page of the purchase contract, right? And are you going to advise as you walk through this purchase contract for an unrepresented buyer?
No.
No. So where's the perfect place to start?
Well,
Right here on this buyer beware page, right? I highly recommend that if somebody says they want to make an offer on a property and they'll meet with you in an hour or so or whatever, I recommend you send them the copy from AAR that says sample across it. Please do not send them a blank document with your name on the bottom, because I will bet you anything that that offer will be sent. If they don't make a offer on yours, that buyer is going to go out and fill that offer in and write it on another property as if they're an agent. Can they do that?
Not legal.
Why not? Why not legally?
well, they're misrepresenting, no?
These forms are copyrighted by the Arizona Association of Realtors and are not allowed to be used by anyone that is not a licensed realtor. And by the way, if they actually read the contract, so many of the lines would be void because they reference to the realtors in the contract itself. But you start here. I would definitely have them read this. Part of the reason to sit in person is let them sit there and read it. You are not commenting on it. Just want to make sure you understand before you sign this contract. The department gives you some disclosure information to advise that you take a look at these parts of the contract in detail. Make sure that you understand those things. Period. Don't ask me questions. Just period. Please read through this. Right?
We can't even tell them, we can't even say that you must disclose, we can't even say that, right?
To the buyer?
To the buyer. No, yeah, the buyer.
What do you want them
Oh,
to
no, I'm sorry,
disclose?
sorry, so-
Yeah, no. The seller has to
So we're
disclose.
sending them a sample so they could read over it before, because you're gonna fill it out on their behalf, right?
Well, you're probably gonna show up with a computer, but yes, or you
And
filling it
this way
out
they had a
beforehand.
chance to read it over before they see what you put in, and
Yep.
yeah.
And so the very bottom of it, part of the reason, even before talking to Ron this morning, that I did feel like the buyer advisory was something that you would have them sign, is that's at the bottom of the first page. I don't know if anybody even realizes that. We go through this so quickly, right? The bottom of this says to a buyer, you can obtain information through the buyer advisory, and gives the exact link to what is always updated. And what I like to actually do is send that link to people so they have the link. Okay. You can send the email of it as well, but that's there. And then there's, and this is one I would probably actually state out loud to them. Remember, you are urged to consult with an attorney, inspectors, and experts of your choice in any area of interest or concern in the transaction. How is somebody writing on my? How are you writing on that, Ami? I did not know I had it as a whiteboard. Not sure how you can
Not
delete
smart,
that,
right?
but if No,
That
it's,
actual slide that you put on there that has the trust on it.
no, I didn't do that. Somebody on the Zoom did that. If you can erase that, I'd appreciate it because it's being recorded. Thank you. But I appreciate the sentiment. If you have a highlighter, you can highlight that. I don't know the line worked, but I would
So
absolutely,
sorry.
no, you're
I
fine.
was
I
taking
love
a
you.
picture of it and I didn't realize that I hadn't erased it.
That's okay. So, but I would actually say this bold section, remember you are urged to consult with an attorney, inspectors, and experts of your choice in any area of interest or concern in the transaction. And I would absolutely tell that to an unrepresented buyer. I would say that out loud. I would make that part of my presentation to an unrepresented buyer. Because you need to be reinforcing, if they have questions, please consult legal counsel. I am not your representative.
What page is that on there?
That's the very first page.
Oh, that's the first page.
That's the
Okay.
pre-page one,
I
right?
wonder how many unrepresented buyers just actually realize how important it is to get an inspection. I mean, I could see them having no clue whatsoever. Just-
Well, we'll talk about that because we'll talk about who do you represent in a little bit and whether or not that makes sense. I hope.
So here's a
Yep.
good one. Ben got an inspection recently on Unrepresented, and the seller's agent gave him an inspection.
We'll talk about that. So the buyer advisory, again, I said C under number 8. This is obviously the top of this line. Okay. So you are going to work through, whoops, I did not mean to do that. Hopefully I can go backwards here. Trying to move my little guy out of the way. Okay. You are going to work through the contract, asking the buyer questions to fill in the blanks. No opinions, no advice. What is your legal name? Is there a second buyer? Oh, there is. Where are they? They need to be here, right? But if you're meeting them before, if you're filling this in earlier, you need to ask all of these. And I literally went through the contract, all of the blanks. What is your offer price? What is the earnest money? Yes, you can share that 1% is often used as the amount that is put in for earnest money. There is nothing illegal about mentioning that. They can tell you, I want to give $1. I'll put $1 down. No opinions, no advice. They tell you what they want to put down, right? But yes, you can share the 1% is often used. Additional funds, are they putting additional funds down? Or how much is the loan? What type of loan? Are they doing a one loan? Are they doing 2 loans, right? Lines 13 through 15, you can put that in there. 17, are they giving a personal check, wire transfer? How are they getting their earnest money in? Okay. Possession, close of escrow or other. Don't you think you need to at least have that conversation? Right? Because most buyers don't know when close of escrow is. So do you need to tell them that close of escrow is recordation? Yes. Okay. You're not giving an opinion. You're explaining the process, right? And they need to know that because all of a sudden, how many do you think are going to say, well, I want to move in 2 weeks early? Okay. I will, I will send you I'm not even sure we're going to want to do that, but a pre-possession agreement, which honestly with an unrepresented buyer, I wouldn't even be going down there. But let's say the seller wants a post-possession, right? You represent the seller. You probably need to say, just so you know, the seller has instructed me that they would like to remain in the property for 2 weeks. Normal close of escrow is on this date. They would like to stay. You would need to explain that. Not that the buyer needs to offer it, but just to explain it, saying the seller has been asking for this on other offers. I just want you to know that that's something he's done before. I don't know this offer if they'll be asking for that or not. Okay. Addenda incorporated. What other addenda applies? Is there a buyer contingency, right? What else needs to be included here? You still have to do all of that, but you're asking the buyer the questions so they tell you how to fill this form out.
And if they say, what does a buyer contingency mean? You can explain that to them.
Well, and when you get to the section of financing, The question is, how are they purchasing this home? Are they doing it with cash? Do they need to sell their property? Because you'll know that when you get their prequal. Right? You shouldn't be sitting down to finish this contract if you don't actually have their prequal, which is coming from another lender or coming from a lender, right? They must get a prequal from a lender. Seller concessions, it's part of the contract. They're asking for seller concessions. Are you going to tell them that most buyers are asking for 3%? And I'm making things up, right? But are you going to say that to an unrepresented buyer? Are you going to say, do you know that you could potentially get money to help buy down your interest rate? No, because who are you representing?
So,
Right? Now, if they say, I want 3% because I want to buy down my interest rate, what are you going to do?
Write it in.
Write it in. It's your present, it's your offer. So, no opinions, no advice. And honestly, going into the meeting, I would be saying, no opinions, no advice, no opinions, no advice. Because I know you guys are passionate about helping your buyers.
Well, they
Right?
Hire you.
They hire you, they do. These folks did not. Actually, what are you going to say when they say they want their 3% commission, by the way? That's not even on here.
What do you mean they want their 3% commission? You
Oh, because they're unrepresented. They want the 3%.
don't get it. You don't have an agent. Sorry.
They're not licensed. That's an agent offer.
Yeah.
Right, that's
Agent
not-
compensation.
Agent offered
Yeah.
compensation that has nothing to do with your offer.
Yeah.
My compensation has already been determined by my listing contract, period.
So your compensation remains the same, even though an unrepresented buyer comes in and you're doing all their paperwork.
Well, it depends on how you wrote your listing contract,
Okay.
right? Because if you wrote your listing contract and it says your total price is here and buyer's agent gets this, if there's no buyer's agent, that whole thing goes to you. Or on the bottom, if you write, if there is no buyer representation or an unrepresented buyer, line 39 is amended to read this, okay?
Put that in the additional form.
I have a question, Melissa.
Yep.
Would it be more prudent to have the buyers that are unrepresented fill the contract out themselves? Because I could see there being a discrepancy if we fill it out for them and something happens where, oh, I didn't say that. And it becomes like a he said, she said type of situation.
They're signing it. They're signing it. That's why I don't want you to do DocuSign.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sitting with them and going over it, but yeah, you could print it out and have them handwrite it, but you got to hope that their handwriting's legible. That's the only problem.
But
But
I
you
thought we
can't.
couldn't,
Yeah.
because it's, they're not an
Okay,
agent, so
you-
they can't use that form.
Yeah, so they.
True. You have to fill it out for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they have to come up with their own contract.
Right.
law.
Yeah. You should be filling it out, but to your point, you're filling it out and going over it with them to make sure their information is in there and they're then signing it. So I don't think they have any grounds to say that you changed it. The concern I would have is if over the phone you're going over it and then you send it to them to DocuSign and they don't see that you made a mistake, that would be a problem, right? That's why I would prefer you not use DocuSign or e-sign or Authentisign, whatever it is.
And
And
I-
then
this is
if-
going to get sticky. This whole change is going to turn the industry upside down. I could see so many issues arise from all this.
Well, again, let me caveat here, right? This is subject to change. At this time, this is what our broker has said we are allowed to do. And I've already had 3 people call me in the last 2 weeks saying I have an unrepresented buyer. What do I do? So that's why I'm going over all this, because I think
Yeah.
what often happens is we put on our buyer headgear and are ready to go to battle for our buyers. It's like, take that off. You represent the seller.
Right.
You do
And I
not
don't
represent
mean-
the buyer.
I don't mean in the sense what the brokerage is trying to do as far as mitigate this. I'm just saying the fact that the whole lawsuit happened and now we're having to deal with this, I think is going to create a big issue in the industry itself,
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we're in a series of transition. We're going to have new forms by later this summer. Some of this stuff may have changed and we may actually get an unrepresented buyer form. But at this time, we do not have one in the state of Arizona. Okay.
Gotcha.
Do some brokerages have one? Sure. People write up all sorts of stuff all over the place. We are advised by our designated broker to use the agency form first and foremost to set the position of unrepresented buyer, then use the purchase contract. There are a lot of people that are saying, just tell them to write what they want on a piece of paper, and then we will counter with the purchase contract. Our designated broker feels it is better for the seller to use this form in this manner to protect our sellers. Okay, so that there is no confusion or misunderstanding from something they write on a sheet of paper that we then have to basically say everything on page 1 has been deleted and we're now using our purchase contract, which is pretty much what would happen, right? Think about the REO days, days where you had big block buyers that are sending out their contract that is used all across the nation with terminology that we don't even use in Arizona, that then obliterates our purchase contract, and we're going, inspection period, how long was that? Wait, what? So in the best interests of our seller is using the contract that we know and we can protect our sellers with. So let's keep going here real quickly. Appraisal costs, right? There's boxes to be checked there. If it's cash, you're jumping past that section. Title company. Now, who are you working for? The seller. Currently, here, we have a benefit to our sellers by using Rock Title. Are you allowed to say the seller would like to use? Yes,
Yeah.
you absolutely are. Now, if the buyer says, no, I want to use XYZ title, okay, that's who you're going to write in. What is the seller going to do on the counter?
Way back the other time.
Probably counter it. Why not? Right? They have the right to. Okay. And, if they don't want to, that's fine. They don't have to. Again, jumping back to the ABA, on the ABA, it says that there's a discount. At this point, you could say, by the way, if you do use Rock Title, both you and the seller receive 50% off that escrow fee, not the title fee, the escrow fee. Okay. Prorations of assessment and fees. Each of these, I've identified every single line item that has to be filled in, checked, or at least addressed as you go through the contract. Okay. Did the buyer walk through the premises? If they did, write the word none in there, that they are not working off of any verbal representations. If they did not, why did they not go through the property if you're sitting there with them? Obviously, if they're out of state, like you guys had mentioned, then that's a different story. Then don't put anything on line 211.
A quick question then.
Yep.
Let's say you meet an unrepresented buyer outside of the property and you haven't gone through any of this yet, and they want to be unrepresented, they're interested in the home, and they say, hey, can you show me the property? You're able to show them the property?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Just like you would at an open
Like any
house.
other buyer, okay.
But you need to keep, especially if they've already told you that they don't want representation, what are you telling them about the house? Price? Facts.
Just fine, yeah.
Just facts. No opinions, no advice. Just keep repeating that. No
But
opinions.
you
no
can't
advice.
bolster the house up for the seller in the eyes
Nope.
of these buyers? No? Like,
Well, as
yeah.
long as you're telling facts.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I
as
mean, you
long
could
as
say,
you're
sure, but
telling
you
them
could
facts.
make it sound great and somebody like, this house is the washer, here is the dryer, but you could really go into like how amazing the washer dryer is.
No. No. Just the facts, okay? Inspection period days, right? Inspection period days. Who do you represent? Seller. Is it in the seller's best interest for the buyer to waive the inspection?
Actually, no. No, absolutely not.
Some of you have questions on your faces. I can see that. You are absolutely correct. It is not in the seller's best interest to waive the inspection. Why? Does anybody know why?
Well,
Liability.
yeah, I mean, stuff needs to be disclosed and things need to be,
So our purchase contract has in it paragraph after paragraph that protects the seller as long as the buyer does their inspections.
Right.
The buyer waives their inspections, is the seller as protected?
Oh.
I don't think so.
They should be though, 'cause they're waiving it on their own behalf. So they should take on that.
And they are
responsibility.
unrepresented and you are standing there getting that done, who is being protected there? Not your seller.
I know realistically I understand, but I'm saying like, to me, it just doesn't make sense. They choose to waive it, so they made the decision that they could run into things that they're not aware of later in the future, because they chose not to have an inspection. So that's their decision, so
But
I understand the
who
law.
are you representing?
Seller.
So do you want them to at least have this unrepresented buyer to do an inspection?
Oh, yeah.
That's the point of this.
But I'm saying like, yes, in in this climate that we're in, but I'm saying like, I just feel like that shouldn't even be the issue that we should have to worry about, but yes.
But is it because
I-
they don't wanna pay for it? Do you wanna ask the seller to pay for it?
No. No, that you're not talking about payment at all.
So,
Buyers-
so,
Go ahead.
sorry, question. So you want us to do, advisement about the inspection period?
There's a part in the contract that has a blank line or 10 days. So you do need to ask them how many days they want for their inspection period.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
These
then-
are all line items that have to be either addressed or they automatically have a time frame in them. There's automatically a 10-day inspection period.
Right.
So you need
But-
to ask them, do you want 10 days or is there some other length of time you want, period?
I have a question to that though. Like, for example, on the contract, the default time period for inspection is 10 days.
Correct.
Correct. So let's say we have that conversation with the unrepresented buyer and they say, yeah, 10 days is fine. And then we leave it at that. The 10 days pass. They don't do their inspection because, they're busy, whatever it may be. They close. And then later there's an issue and they say, well, I wasn't told that it was 10 days. And then we don't have any proof to show that we informed them of that. I mean, again, you're going to say that they signed it.
Again, if your practice is to go over all of these sections of that contract
Yes.
with an unrepresented buyer, then you did go over it.
Can I ask something? Would it be possible to maybe record that session or have something to back us up? Because again, I could see this turning into a he said, she said situation because there's so many lines in the contract. I know these buyers are going to forget.
Well, I understand the buyers are going to forget. They also, again, that's why I would not do it via e-sign. I would
Right.
do it in person.
Correct.
And if your protocols, if the way your standard operating practice is to go over every single one of these lines that I've given you on these 2 slides, which all had either something already in there or a blank line next to it, then you went over all of these with them. And if you were asked in a court, and somebody said, well, you didn't do it. Well, it's interesting because I go and see an unrepresented buyer, this is my standard operating procedure. I go over every one of these sections of the contract and we sat there and went over every single page. That's why I met with them in person. Who do you think is going to have the upper hand there? If you say that this is what I do each and every time and show that you go over every single one of these, that is what is going to be looked at, not that they did not have they didn't read that they had a 10-day inspection
I
period.
mean, the other thing too is like, if you send them a sample that is advanced, then you say, well, you also had a copy of the contract that you could have read over several times before we met, and we went over it together anyways.
Right.
So it's there, it's been with you the whole time.
The bottom line is they're signing a contract, that's in the contract.
Yeah, they're signing a contract. You want to get into recording personal, meetings with people, you're welcome to, but I think that is an awful lot to do.
And in the state of Arizona, you better let them know that you're recording the contract.
No, you don't have to. Only one party in this state needs to know that you are recording.
That's true, you're not recording someone else, you're right.
No. If you're a party to the recording, you have the right to
Right.
record. Only one party is
Exactly.
needed in the state. But yes, you can do that. I just don't think you need to. But the key here is that if they tell you that they want to waive that, is it in your seller's best interest for the buyer to waive it? I just want to make sure people understand it's not. So
Yeah, I agree.
I would encourage them to do, even if it's just 2 or 3 days, but to do the, a small, short inspection period. If they don't want to pay for an inspection, that doesn't mean that they can't come over and walk through the home. Now,
And
if they're
then
unrepresented, somebody's got to be there with them. Go ahead.
would it be prudent, maybe, okay, so not maybe to record, but maybe send an email correspondence where they acknowledge that, hey, I covered everything on every single line of the contract. To your understanding, everything was great. You have no questions and no concerns or something like that.
Unfortunately, I guess you can ask questions, but the problem is they can ask questions, but you can't answer them. I think the way to do that is say, if you have any questions, as we've said before, please seek legal counsel.
Right.
Because
Okay.
that's the problem, is you can't ask them if they have any questions or concerns.
And
Because you can't answer those.
and we can't refer inspection companies either, right? Because same
So
concept.
let me get to that. We'll go down. Let me finish this page
Okay.
here. I'll get to both of that because we do have a little change on that one. Sewer or on-site wastewater treatment, obviously you have to check those boxes. And if it's an on-site wastewater treatment, you've got to pull that form in, right? You've got other forms that apply. Home warranty plan, or that they decline a home warranty, right? They need to know that that's an option in the contract. These are not things you're offering up to them. You are just asking, how do you want me to fill in these lines? Okay. Then terms of acceptance, response date and time. They need to understand that is the date and time the seller is going to respond to them. Okay. And they have to give you that date and time. And yes, you can say typically we would do about 24 hours, right? Or if you know the seller is traveling and they need 48 hours, I would tell them that I am aware that the seller is traveling and they would have requested 48 hours, right? You can say that. All right. Okay. So to your point, what can you provide as the seller's agent to an unrepresented buyer?
Honesty.
Title. Seller can recommend because you represent the seller. So you absolutely could say the seller would prefer to use blah, 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 blah.
You're talking about like the escrow title.
Title and escrow, yes.
Not like title, but like escrow.
It's the same.
Well, I know, but you have rock company or rock that is the escrow company, but then they do don't they use another
No, it's, you
title
just,
company to
it's the
be the
t-
title? Or not,
Yeah,
I guess
but
I'm
you-
thinking of mixing up with insurance, title insurance.
it is title insurance, title and escrow. They do this, they do it all together.
But they use another company to give them that.
They do, but
Yeah.
you have one line to fill in.
Okay.
Just one line. All right. Then only if asked by an unrepresented buyer can you provide lenders. Now, here's the thing. How many of you have your list of lenders on a 1 or 2 page document that has other recommendations, like inspectors or title companies or other things like that? You are not to send that sheet. Okay. That's why I'm saying create a blank page with 3 lenders, period. Okay. If they ask for it. Otherwise, where's your prequal coming from? Awesome. Glad you're sending that from your credit union, your bank, your broker, whoever. Looking forward to it. You got to sign it. Okay.
Well, I have a question right there then. Because I advise all my buyers that in order to make an offer, they must have their pre-qual. There's no point in me showing them houses if they're
Correct.
not even pre-qualified. So if this unrepresented buyer, would you not be able to ask him before you even start doing all of this?
Yes. But remember, here's the thing, right? A lot of folks are at open houses and an unrepresented buyer comes in. So some of these things will be happening in different sequences. If they walk in and say, I want to be an unrepresented buyer and I want you to write up the offer, can you do that? Yes.
But can I ask them, well, do you have a pre-qual?
Yes. In order to meet with you, I need you to have your pre-qualification form provided. And if they then say, do you have any lenders? Yes, I will get you a list of lenders you may call. And I recommend you talk to several of them, okay? But again, I want to make sure, because I know my lender page was always jumbled with a whole lot of other information. I had 2 pages of information I would send to my potential buyers with, here's information for you. Please do not use that, because the rest of that is a part of you representing a buyer, not a part of this.
So I don't have an actual sheet. I send them to my website where I have a resources page.
You are not to
So I
send them
can't
to your
get
website. Nope. Nope. In fact, prefer you not do that. Inspectors, can you hand out inspector lists? No. No, 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 no. Please suggest you look on the internet or talk to your friends. Do not give out. And why is that? Liability, bias, something goes wrong, guess what? Yep, it all comes back to you. Okay,
But don't we always, even when we recommend these things, it's always talked about that it's like even the buyers still have the responsibility and due diligence to look into.
they
each-
do.
And in the end, it's their responsibility which inspector or lender they choose, even if we recommended them, like it's not up to us and we're not actually at fault if something goes wrong with their choices.
It's true.
So why is that even such an issue for us? then?
Because they are unrepresented. And the lender, personally, we would prefer that they find the lender on their own as well.
Yeah.
Now, if you're at an open house and have, say, Epic Lending stuff at the open house and they see it and see the thing about the 1%, special that they're running, and they ask about that, you can say, yeah, this is a lender I've worked with before and this is a pretty cool program, period. They want to call Barb, then that's fine, but you are not to say, oh, you know what, let me text you my favorite lender and send that over. Nope. You find your lender, you find your inspectors. Again, if they say they do not have a lender, because there are so many lenders out there and so many of them we have so many issues with, Ron has said that we can give a list of 3 stellar lenders that we know of so that they can make their choice from those. I don't know how many of you have used, online lenders that are out of state, that don't know how to use our contracts, don't know the timelines, don't know our paperwork, right? That becomes an issue, right? And you and I all know that they're going to show up with a pre-approval letter that is not gonna work for our pre-qual form. And then we have to try to figure out how to get our pre-qual form to them because our contract says that it's being attached, right? So that one you can't have. All right, I've actually run out of time from being able to, I was gonna show you how to do this in terms of those. I'm gonna go ahead and open it up for questions. So any other questions? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
I have one.
Yep.
So you have an unrepresented buyer come to you and they say, I'm gonna make an offer on this house and I want the, buyer's agent commission. How does that conversation go? How do you tell them, well, you're not gonna get it? How do you work that conversation?
You're not a licensed agent.
That's a
So
conversation for a licensed agent.
I will submit your offer and the seller has already agreed to the commissions they've agreed to. And whether or not there's a reduction in commission for an unrepresented buyer was up to the seller before I ever met you. If there's a discount, then the seller already knows about it, but you are you're not a licensed agent.
Right.
The commission has nothing to do with you. I think that's the biggest misnomer, is that the public thinks that they're gonna quote unquote save money by being unrepresented. And I think that's why you need to start with the agency form, right? You're showing them this form that says you are working on behalf of the seller, your fiduciary, your loyalty, your confidentiality, all is with the seller. The buyer has nothing. I mean, we all know our buyers have lost out when they've gone to new builds because They're not represented, right? And we've tried to explain that to people time and time again. Oh, no, I'll be fine. Okay, well, you just lost $15,000 and oh, that thing they verbally told you that they didn't write down that didn't happen because nothing was written down. Oh well, sorry. Oops, because you had no representation. Right? And that happens literally all the time. If it's not in writing, it does not exist. And that is in our state law regarding purchase contracts, right? If it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So if that unrepresented buyer wants something, it had better get put down in writing. So, other questions, people online? Got a whole slew of people here. Good morning. Anybody else have questions?
So I guess the other question is like, if you get somebody to come in to the open house and they're like, oh, I think I want to put an offer, would you write it up for me? I'm not gonna use an agent. You can say, sure, I can help you, but we'll have to meet up at another time and go over these
Yes.
documents and agency and
Yes.
everything and fill that out. And I'm gonna need you to get a proof of funds, bring that with you. And this way we have that already ready to go.
Yep.
But you don't have them fill anything out on the spot of an open house. You have them, you meet with them at another time after that and then go over things.
Yeah, I wouldn't because we all know it's gonna take an hour to do
Right.
this. So if you're at an open house, unless the open house is ending and you can go pull your signs,
Mhm.
you know, but in that case, I'd be meeting him at a Starbucks,
Mhm.
you know, and yes, you could do it on your computer if you needed to, but you know, our office is right here. We've got offices all around the valley, you know, you could prep it and then even if you're in an office that your computer doesn't print to the printer, you could go onto one of the bullpen computers, log in and print it from there.
Are you allowed to say, is there a reason why you don't want representation?
Is that in the best interest of your seller?
Maybe because you can find out some information.
I guess it's not.
I think you have to ask and answer that
If
question.
you're in an open house, doing an open house, it's not your open house, you're doing an open house. And you get a buyer that says, I want to put in an offer, great, you have an agent? No, and I don't want an agent, I want to do it myself. Then you say, is there a reason why you don't want representation?
Yes, because you do not represent the seller in that scenario, so you have nothing to do with the situation there. So for those, hold on, for those online that didn't hear that, if you are sitting somebody else's open house and someone walks in and says, I don't want representation, but I want to write an offer on this property, you're going to be stuck there because you do not represent the seller. And unless that buyer basically hires you as their agent to write that offer, you can't represent them. You have to call the listing agent and say there's an unrepresented buyer here that wants you to meet with them. Right? Because you can't do it then because you're not getting paid. They don't want to pay
I can say,
absolutely. If you are not, if it's not your listing and you do not represent that seller, you absolutely can say, why would you not want representation? Here is what I can do for you.
right,
Right?
right.
So yes, but if you represent the seller, it's a different story.
Sure.
And again, you have to have had the conversation with your seller. You know, are you willing to let me do limited representation, dual representation, or write a contract for an unrepresented buyer? I mean, I think that needs to be a part of your listing presentation.
Yeah.
What are you willing to do? It certainly has to be in your contract. Like, what are you doing that? Look, the last few deals I've had were trash properties, and I wrote in the bottom if it was an unrepresented buyer, this price, you know, the commission adjusts, because I knew full well we were getting wholesalers, right? And so I already had that in there for wholesalers, not for this particular scenario, but I think it applies the same way in that if it's an unrepresented buyer or a buyer that doesn't, you know, a buyer agent that doesn't want the buyer broker fee. The reason I was doing that is because most of those wholesalers were trying to sweeten the deal by removing their commissions, which was always a joke because it's like, you're removing it, but it still goes to me. Like, that's not how it's set up, folks.
Right.
So I always went over that with my sellers first. So if they're waiving their fee, this is what's gonna happen, right? Does that make sense? So you could do the same type of thing in terms of addressing what you're doing with that buyer broker fee.
I had a guy come into an open house that said, would you be willing to allow me to place an offer, go through you? It was 3%, would be coming to me. And discount it to 1%, give me the 2%. You take one and I take two.
Okay. So for those online, one of our agents had a guy walk into an open house and ask our agent to represent them, and there was a 3% co-broke, and they asked for the agent to do 1% and credit them 2% back. Everything is on the table, guys. Everything is negotiable. There,
$0.8 million house.
it was a $3.8 million home. I would be doing that for 1% day in and day.
Just to do the paperwork? Yeah, so in the beginning. In my head, but then I thought.
So,
This is bad.
no, so back in the day,
What? No, he was super savvy.
yeah, so
You can't pay somebody part of your commission.
you can credit a buyer.
Okay.
You can credit a buyer towards closing costs
I
always.
called the listing agent, this guy, so. Big time. This is when I was with, a different place. And he said, he gave me a strategy. Let's hear what you do. And he told me what to do. And I kind of tried it, but the guy was too smart.
Yeah. So again, everything is negotiable, guys. You need to negotiate your commissions for yourself. And some of you are going to be fine with one thing and others are not. And I can tell you that, in the middle of short sale days, there were times when I was like, if I can just make this amount on this deal, I will do that deal, right? So you got to have your price tag, if you will. Okay. But again, it's all negotiable and it all depends on the situation. I will tell you that please, please, please do not underestimate the time involved to be a dual representative if you are having to do both sides, or an unrepresented buyer. If you're having to do all that paperwork and keep track of all that, it is a lot of extra work. So if the seller is saying, yeah, you're only going to get your side of this, please protect yourself on that, because there is a lot of additional time involved, even if it is just simply meeting with the other party to make sure they've got the documents and that you're filling them in accurately for them, because I would not recommend just zinging them off on DocuSign. I really wouldn't. So please, please, please be careful. Any more last questions? Because I know I've run over the hour again, so.
Final question on my behalf, at least. Are we obligated to do that process? Like, and actually sitting down and filling out the form for an unrepresented buyer if it is our listing?
No. Your other option is if you know there's an interested party, your seller can prepare the offer backwards. So your seller can basically say, this is what I want. This is the time frame. This is, of course, you got to find out how much they're putting down and what their loans are. But I mean, if you find that out, your seller can write the offer and then the buyer can review it and respond. Are you obligated as a seller to deal with an unrepresented buyer if you don't want to? If you represent the seller? No, but you certainly can encourage them to have a limited representation, get an agent and at least use a limited representation that somebody else from the office is handling it. But if they say no, is that in the best interest of the seller? You have to talk to your seller about that, right? You get some buyer coming in that's got cash and doesn't want to, have an agent. You have to present all offers. They could write it on a piece of, if your listing contract says no verbal offers and they email you and say, look, I want to buy this home for $505,000. It's listed at 500. You have to present that. And then the question is, how do you get it under contract? So the reverse is absolutely an option. I'm hearing about that more and more. I have not seen it done. I would recommend that you have to change the response times in section 8, where you can write things that the buyer is obligated to respond by XYZ time. Because the bottom of it says the seller's responding, so you're gonna have to flip that up, but, okay?
Got it.
All right, guys. Thank you,
Thank you, Melissa.
Again, just last caveat, this is subject to change. Things are changing in our industry right now. My guess is we will have some specific forms for this in the future. But right now we do not, and I wanted to make sure you knew what we were using so you could handle it, like one of our agents that has to go deal with an unrepresented buyer now. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.